Every single weekend is like birthday party, some ball pit, a different ball pit.
Yeah,
These
you go
kids'
from
birthday
ball pit to
parties.
ball pit. But the kids love it, man. It's amazing that how much the kids have fun attending these birthday parties. They have a blast. But it's every birthday party has the same cadence to it. You get there, you try to look for the parents that you know. Then you start hanging out,
Right.
conversations. You watch over your kids. They're playing. Then it's time for
Invariably, you'll lose your kid. You're like, huh, where's my kid at? And then
yeah,
you
where's
find
the
him
kid?
again.
All the kids come together for the cake cutting. They cut cake. They eat pizza.
Right.
And then you're on your way, so you kind of have an idea where the party's going, and I feel like every party I go to is the same kind of cadence.
It goes through the stages, like the pediatric birthday party stages. That
Yeah, but that's life in your mid to late 30s, right? When your kids are growing, and birthday parties is essentially part of that. That's a part of the current millennial experience where you go to
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, I feel like, at this age, like when your kids are, I don't know, 5 and under. I mean, even over that. But like, so much of your time is so accounted for because their life is so regimented, and your life is forced to be regimented as well because you're the one making their life happen and taking care of them and taking them everywhere and doing stuff with them. So the brief little snippets of free time, I mean, are just like glimpses, right? And it's made me really value that free time so much more than. I mean, I like a decade ago. Like I'm sure you feel the same way.
For sure, in your 20s, you have so much more free time. You don't really value your time as much. A friend calls you like, hey, you wanted to go do this. You'll just go out and just go hang out with random groups of people that you might not even know as well. You waste your time maybe binge watching shows all day. You could spend like 2 to 3 hours at the gym if you need to, or you'd want to be out all the time and socialize and just on the go all the time in your 20s, kind of trying to maximize any free time you had. Like, it was different a little bit for us because we were in medical school, so there was not that much time anyways, but still a lot more free time than we have now. But as you get in your mid to late 30s and you have kids, time just becomes so much more valuable. And I now, every single minute, I want to spend time doing the stuff that would first maximize my time with my kids and my wife. Second, work on making myself better, right? Better as a better dad, better physician, and better business person. And I want to do things. I feel like I don't have the energy and the want or desire to spend time on either things I don't care about or people I don't care about. I just want to hang out with people I care about and want to spend time with. I want to do things that would make me better, right? So I think every time as you come from, I'm much more careful now with my time than I used to be in my 20s.
Yeah, you become much more purposeful and intentional with your stuff. You don't just kind of what you're saying. You don't just go with the flow as often anymore. That some random guy, texts you like, "Hey, you want to do this?" or "Hey, a bunch of us are meeting up here. You want to come?" You stop like rolling with it as often. I feel like, and because you just have such little free time, especially like personal time, to do things like reading. That's something that honestly, man, I used to do a lot of reading. That's really like fallen by the wayside. Because it just takes a while to sit with a book and really get into it, and then you get interrupted. You may not have time to read for another 3 4 days. Your train of thought gets messed up. So that's something that I really want to cultivate again, and that's like what we've been talking about with the new year
Yeah.
and the resolutions and stuff. But starting the book club, I think that's huge, right? A bunch of us holding each other accountable, and reading these books together and talking about them. It checks off the box of a social interaction, but also, you have like your boys holding you holding you accountable to make sure you read the book.
Yeah, definitely. I love reading books. I think books are, it's kind of like, strength training and weightlifting is exercise for your body, and books are an exercise for your mind. You have to keep your mind sharp, keep your mind updated, and books are key to that. Right now, our life, the world has become so rotten with doom scrolling, right? People work so addicted to our phones, constant doom scrolling. There's Instagram, Reels, TikTok, and that was one of my thoughts. I would find myself with recently having a new baby. There was times when I'd be holding her and sitting, and she would be sleeping sometimes, and I found myself getting on my phone a lot more and doom scrolling a little bit. And I was like, this is not too healthy. Like, it's just rotting my mind away. There's a lot of good information you get within 30 seconds of clips, but uh,
Yeah.
how I want to spend my money, time and brain power. So that's when I felt like I needed to read more, and it's become a better habit over this past 3 to 4 months where I've been reading a lot more, and since there's that downtime with at home more, started reading, and that's when we started that book club, and now it's even
Yeah.
more because now I'm hearing a lot of different recommendations from you guys about the books and reading, and then you guys holding each other accountable for that, right? So I
Oh, for
think
sure, for sure. It's fun too because you read a book. Anyone reads a book, and they glean something from it based on their life context, and someone brings up something that you're like, oh wow, I never even thought of that. It's like
yeah.
it's like almost something clicks, and sometimes I find myself going back and at least reading that passage or that part of the book or that chapter again. If someone makes a pretty insightful comment, I think it's awesome because you can gain something from the book yourself reading it, but then also someone else's life context and their own example and their own experiences reading the same thing, they got something different out of it. And now that's really what I enjoy a lot in this discourse with book club and with the other people that read these books. You
Yeah,
kind of learn from
a
others
lot of people
experience.
we interact with are very, very intelligent people as well. And I think getting their perspective and their views, and everyone we know kind of has different ideas about life. Everyone's politics is different. Everyone's life situations are different. So getting everyone's perspective on certain books, it's kind of interesting. You get to see the world from a different lens, and no and even if you kind of look at yourself, sometimes you might read a book in your 20s, your early 20s, mid 20s, and that same book, if you read it in your mid 30s, it's a completely different book. It hits you a different way, right?
For
Uh,
sure,
you
for
get a
sure.
whole different meaning out of that book. So just hearing ideas from other people who are in different stages of life, in different professions, and different ideologies, like it's very interesting. One thing that I've kind of started doing more and more is I've started to read books in a way where I start 6 or 7 different books at the same time, and I start reading them. And there's certain books that on a certain day I find more interesting. I keep reading them more on that day, and then those fall off for a few weeks, and I'm on to a different book where I'm reading that book for a while. So I always have like different books kind of competing over time, and I found that an interesting strategy. And one thing I recently saw that it's is from a lot of people who read a lot is it's okay to sometimes drop a book for a while and just forget about it and let it go. If you're halfway through it and it's not moving forward, you're not liking it, it's okay to drop the book and kind of move forward and just move on to something else that you find interesting. Because even from month to month and what you're going through in life, your views about certain topics change. And it's okay to find one book interesting in 1 month and then come back maybe 6 months later and find that book more interesting, and then you start reading it again, right?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I'm totally different though. Like, if I start a book, I have to finish it. I just like even if I don't like it, I get halfway through, I'm like, gosh, this book sucks. I force myself to finish it. And I try my best not to start another one at the same time because I don't know, man. I get so scatterbrained, and like I start thinking I'm like reading another book, and I'm like, oh, I didn't finish that other one. I got to finish that other one. I'm the same way with like TV shows. Like I've never really like watched more than one TV show at a time. I'll just like watch that one through, or like I can't watch like a movie, finish it halfway, and then start a different movie, and then go back. Like it's the same way with books. If I start a book, even if I hate it, like I'll finish it. I'll just force myself to read it, and I'll end up starting reading less and less of it. So that book will just drag out because I'm not enjoying it. But I don't know. I'm not saying my way is right or wrong. It's interesting that you're very comfortable like reading 6 or 7 whatever books at one time and maybe like pausing on one, reading another one, reading 2 other books and coming back to it. I don't know. I would lose like the gist or the crux of the book or like whatever I was thinking at the time. I would have to like refresh, maybe start over or at least start some of it over.
Yeah, you just the reason I started doing that because I kind of used to be like you. I used to start one book and stick with it and try to finish it as much as possible. And what I found myself doing was I was just kind of getting annoyed with reading, and I would just stop reading altogether. And once I would finish that book, I wouldn't start a new book anymore for a while, and I would take a break. And because and halfway through the book, if I'm losing interest, I would start looking at other books, but I won't be able to start them as well because I needed to finish this book, right? But once since I've started doing this new strategy. I find myself like going back to books that I wasn't finding interesting, and then starting to all of a sudden getting interest in them and reading them again. So that way, it's changed my mindset a lot. So I think it's a strategy that some people use, but I don't think there's any one right or wrong way. Right? There's many different ways. That the way I think about getting ideas, sometimes you with books you need to just get mental models. As you're working out, and just like when you're working out, you're focusing and building mental models at that time, and you're getting ideas chapter by chapter, right? So sometimes I focus on chapter by chapter. I read a chapter, I get some ideas out of it, and those ideas I instill them. And maybe if I move on to a different time or different book, I come back to it. There's a next chapter where I can get a new idea from, right? So that's just the way I've started doing it now, which is a little bit more effective for me. But I don't think there's the wrong or right way, right?
Yeah, and that probably varies a lot by the type of book. Like for example, like a book that's kind of more of like a reference, like it would be applicable to anyone at any point in their life, just like a self-help or self-improvement type book, or a book on an art of negotiation or making a business deal, for example. That could be relevant at many times, and maybe certain parts of that book are more relevant for your specific situation. That's for sure. I hear you. But if it's like a fiction book, like a novel, oh man, I feel like I would go crazy if I like read like three chapters and I'm like, all right, peace. I'll be back in 6 months. Like that would drive me crazy. But that's just how I am. I mean, people are wired differently.
No, there's a book that I read it over a year and a half. It's called Pachinko. It's a long book. It was the number one bestseller for a while. It's about a Korean family living in Japan. It's a huge historic saga, kind of historic fiction. And I read that over years, but I would stop reading, go back to other books, and come back, and I still loved it. So that's just how my brain is wired. But
Yeah.
I thought about doing this episode, kind of reflecting on the book club and kind of what books we've liked, and we've talked about, hey, why don't we just talk about certain books that have, impacted us or we've thought about lately, and not necessarily the best books we've ever read, right? But
Yeah, if there's even such a thing, if someone's like, "What's your favorite book?" I'm like, "Dude, that's like impossible." They're so different depending on when you read them in life, what you were going through, your age. Were you forced to read it in school, or did you pick it up to read for fun? That makes a big difference too.
yeah, yeah. There's no such thing as a favorite book. I mean, there's a favorite book for a favorite season of your life, or but I don't know how I even answer that. I mean, my favorite books are Harry Potter books. At
They're very engrossing. At
Yeah, I mean, but
least they were when we were teenagers, I guess. I mean, I'm sure they
I
still
was
are.
thinking about like what books I think about most often in my life when I'm kind of going about my life, and some books that there were certain lessons or something new that I learned from. And also we kind of talked about making a list, and some interesting books we talk about. And the first book that I kind of want to talk about is kind of more, pertinent to our profession. It's a very interesting book. I read this book a year and a half ago or so, and I read that over a long period of time, and I kept coming back to different chapters. But in this book, there's a lot of different ideas and principles that I learned that I use in my day-to-day life. And I also educate my patients based on some of the stuff I learned from this book. It's a great book. It's called Outlive by Peter Attia. Peter Attia is a
Yeah, big longevity guy, health span, lifespan guy. Yeah.
yeah. So Peter Attia is a he's big in the longevity space. He's trained as a surgeon. He's a pretty smart guy. He was a surgeon. He was going through surgical training, and then he left his surgical training and went into consulting for a while, and then he came back and started doing a lot more longevity work. And then he wrote this book more recently called Outlive, and it's an amazing book. And the reason I liked it is because and we've talked about this in the past, a lot of this longevity stuff, this wellness industrial complex stuff gets very gimmicky, and a lot of the people that start talking about it do not really use much evidence-based medicine, or but Peter
It's a lot
Tia,
of anecdote.
a lot
Yeah.
of anecdotal stuff, right? But Peter Tia does a great job talking about the most common illnesses that are causing us to die early. He used a lot more evidence-based ideas and talks about different things. And as I was listening to the cardiology section, right, he talks about there's a whole chapter on preventive cardiology, and everything he was talking about, I was like, okay, this is something that I'm really already, practicing, is very evidence-based. So when I listened to the cardiology chapter, I was very impressed. As a cardiologist, I was like, okay, this guy really knows what he's talking about. He's not
Yeah.
just making some random lab values. He talked about the pertinent things, all the things that we do in clinical medicine all the time, and and applying those. So I really enjoyed that book a lot, and there's a few ideas from that book. Some of the there's a couple of things he talks about. The first uh, thing he talks about is like the importance of exercise, and kind of a lot more. He goes into a lot more detail about what it entails and what it means to exercise. The importance he gives to muscle mass and building muscle strength training, and how it affects your metabolic um, um, composition in your body. That he does a great job doing that with a lot of evidence-based medicine. He uses personal anecdotes as well about the kind of exercise he does and the patient he sees, and how exercise is very dependent on each patient, right? A 90-year-old coming to your clinic or 80-year-old coming to your clinic would not want to do the same kind of exercise that a 30-year-old is doing. So
Right. Right.
exercise, and it's
Very
not
tailored to the patient. Yeah.
tailored to the
No,
patient.
that's interesting. Like even like Peter Tia, the author. I haven't read this book, but even when you listen to his podcast, he is very evidence based, and he takes huge deep dives and really summarizes and digs into the details of a lot of studies. Which is why I think a lot of people like him and tune into him, because not only is he honest about like providing personal anecdotes and talking about his own practice and his patients, but he really fleshes through the literature a lot. And tries to make it as evidence based as possible, because this whole wellness, if we want to call it just wellness, right? Like living longer, living better, all of that stuff, rather than direct disease prevention and treatment. A lot of this stuff, as you said, is anecdote only, and there's a lot of charlatans out there. So I think the fact that he does that and really distills the evidence is huge. I mean, it makes him more reputable in my mind.
Yeah, and it gets him credibility, right? When a physician, and there's a lot of things he does say in his podcast in real life that maybe not evidence based, that there's logic behind it. There's some kind of like scientific reasoning behind it. So I think everything he's doing, and he's very upfront, honest about it, right? When he talks about in his book, okay, there is strong evidence about it, and there's no strong evidence about it. Just like he talks about nutrition, he talks about nutrition and goes up front. He tells that the, the 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 craziest thing about nutrition science is we don't know anything about nutrition science. And that's why there's so many different fad diets, so many
Right.
charlatans are able to come in and talk about different kind of ideas, because we truly don't know what is good nutrition and what is good diet. And the way he breaks it down, nutrition is in three ways. He calls it CR, DR, and TR. And CR is calorie restriction. Um, TR is time restriction, and and DR is like diet restriction. So you're with calorie restriction is just about how people who eat more versus people who eat less, like high calories or low calories, right? Then there's time restrictions where during what times are you
Yeah,
eating
that's like the premise of intermittent fasting, right?
intermittent fasting, and then DR is these different aspects, how people talk about low carbohydrate diet, low fat diet. So how can you alter different
Like the
intakes of
content of the diet. Yeah.
the content of diet? So and that's why he talks about, he's like, there's many ways of combining different ideas from these diets to optimize what's right for you. And his whole idea in this book is medicine 3.0, where medicine 2.0 is what he calls, we're currently practicing, is where it's reactive, right? Someone gets sick, we find out what's wrong with them, we treat it, right? But medicine 3.0, what he talks about is assessing everyone's biochemistry, personalizing medicine to them, and be preventative rather than reactive. So, you know, um, and he talks about the 3 or 4 big horsemen that kill people: heart disease, cancer, and musculoskeletal disease, and neurodegenerative disease, so Alzheimer's and dementia. and his main theme is how to do things right now, early on in life, and even later on in life to prevent those four things that can eventually kill you. So it's
Nice,
a
man. It sounds like a great book. I mean, it's books like that where, it's not just reading something that some guy who's famous put out there is like, hey, do XYZ. Basically, a bunch of bold claims, right? It's a lot of claims, but it seems like for one, they're backed up by real science, real data, and also honesty about the strength of that data. And then when there isn't real data, like you said, there's logic behind it, but also someone is forthcoming that, hey, this no study's been done on this, but it makes sense because of X, Y, and Z reason. And then giving concrete examples of how you can tailor stuff like the diet or like exercise, because so many, like, here's the reality. I mean, doctors are not personal trainers, physical therapists, or nutritionists, right? So the canned advice from medicine, from the doctor is try to get 30 minutes of aerobic exercise a day, 3 times a week. I mean, it's like, okay, but there's more than that. You know what I mean? And I think patients want more than that. So stuff like this, I think, is an awesome resource for everybody, your average person, to read it and incorporate it into their life. But especially even as physicians, I think. I mean, I'm going to add this book to my list. It sounds awesome. Um,
Yeah, I think every
mhm.
physician should read this. One thing that
Yeah.
really surprised me that I really never thought about is he talks about how Alzheimer's disease and dementia is preventable, right?
Right.
He talks about how there's been numerous studies about how exercise and physical activity and glucose control really prevents dementia and Alzheimer's.
Yeah. I mean, muscle mass and exercise are very neuroprotective. That's the thing for sure.
So I think if any physician who wants to be a good counselor for their patients, who wants to educate their patients in easy terms, Peter Attia provides a lot of good tools, a lot of good clear examples to teach patients about lipids, about exercise, about lipid control, about prevention of Alzheimer's disease. How to think about cancer as well, and what cancer does to your body, and how to prevent cancer, and how to watch out for cancer. I think there's a lot of good models out there. So I think patients for sure. I mean, the general public should read it, but I think especially physicians should really put this book on their list and read about it and use some of the models that he lays out because I think it's very useful.
That's great, man. That's an interesting one.
Yeah. What about
Interesting
you?
one for sure.
The book that you thought about?
Yeah, I mean, one book that I really like, which is totally different than something like this. It's a book that I read when I was a teenager. It was, to be honest with you, it was one of the rare books that we had to read in a school curriculum that I actually just loved. I thought it was awesome. It was a book by Bryce Courtney called The Power of One. Um, and I read it for the first time. I've read this book a couple times. Like we were talking about, it resonates with you at different moments in your life. But I read it when I was, I think, 14, 15, like a freshman in high school. And it's right around the time when the character in the book is around that, grows up. But a big chunk of the book is at that same age, like a middle teenager in that book. And the book, I mean, I'm not going to summarize the whole story. It's a long book, but it's historical fiction right around post World War II apartheid South Africa. So it's a very tumultuous environment to begin with, right? Whites and blacks. The World War just happened. There's a big population of Europeans over there. The tribal conflicts, and then the story of one boy growing up through that, who's relatively an orphan and tries to make something of himself. And it's centered around boxing, and he basically has a dream to become the welterweight champion of the world. And he goes on that path from when he's a child all the way through, gets different trainers, moves around orphanage to orphanage, boarding school to boarding school, whatever. And just the way the story is told is awesome. It's very engrossing, and I think it's something that almost any teenager can relate to. And it just happened at that time in my life. I was boxing a lot. I've been doing martial arts since I was like 11 years old. Um, and I was doing a lot of boxing at that time. So the boxing aspect really appealed to me because it was a very relatable activity. All the training you talked about, the rigor of that, the discipline you need to have in martial arts. It was awesome. And the story of the boy's life, like I was in an all boys school, and the character in the book, his name is PK. He was in all boys boarding schools, so that was similar in a way, and just the struggles, but the dreams he had, and wanting to be something more than he really was, and finding it in himself. All of that stuff was awesome, especially at that age, right? And then I read it again. I think I read it again when I was in college, just because I really liked the story. Um, And it hit a little differently because I was a little older, I was a little more mature. Um, but when you're in college, even when you're like 20, 21, 22 years old, I had never really worked. I hadn't lived what I would term like a real life, right? I was always in some sort of an educational bubble or the bubble of like my parents' protection or now in the college environment. So it was very different. Whereas the character in this book, he at a very, very young age has to fend for himself, which is something I never had to do. So that was another thing I thought Humayun was really interesting is that the idea of someone who's a teenager, basically still a child, but having to forcibly mature right away. Like the social and emotional maturity that is forced upon you in that setting, it's something I never had to really go through, right? I don't think I was immature, but I think I was just any other kid who grew up with loving parents and in an environment that wasn't dangerous or stressful in that sense. And so that was something that was foreign to me, but I found it fascinating.
Yeah,
So
definitely. It's an interesting idea. Have you seen the movie? There's
I
a
did,
movie.
and honestly, I hated the movie. I thought, but I don't know, man. I'm like, I don't know. I don't think I'm a snob, but I think I'm snobbish when it comes to like if I've read a book, I almost always hate the movie because you create like this imagination and this world, and I don't know, man. The movie never lives up to it, if, with few exceptions. I hated this movie, but the book was
Yeah,
awesome.
I mean, I remember watching the movie. I think we watched it in our high school geography class, or
Yeah,
we're learning about our history class, and we're learning about the apartheid South Africa, and that was one
right, right.
I think we watched. So I think when you were talking about this book, I just remembered watching that movie, and I remember I think he's a white kid, right?
Yeah, yeah. He's a white kid.
But
Yep.
he has a mentor who's teaching boxing, and he's a black South African man, from what I
Yeah,
remember.
so he has a few mentors. One of them is a black South African, which is contentious at that time.
Yeah.
But like the kid grows up basically in an environment, jumping through homes, having like a nanny who's black. His parents were white, obviously, going to mostly white schools, but still boxing in an environment where there's a lot of black fighters. So he has a good eye in both worlds. And he never really grows up racist himself, which was very common at that time. So it's like a big thing that he did not grow up racist despite living in apartheid South Africa, which I found was really interesting.
Yeah, because I mean, I think the fact that he had mentors or people that
Hmm.
he interacted with all his life, the whole idea of apartheid is that you get separated, like the two different
Correct.
races are completely separate from each other, and they're not really interacting much with each other. But what we
Hmm.
know is when different races and people who differ from each other, they interact more often, see each other more often, get to know each other, and you learn from them. Those kind of ideas, the racist ideas, the xenophobic ideas, kind of go away a little bit, right? So.
Yeah. It's like being able to almost like seamlessly drift between worlds is a very difficult and I think rare trait to have, an attribute to have. And, it kind of defines some of the immigrant experience in any country. Whether you're first generation, second generation, whatever, you always live kind of in between worlds. Like for us, we have a huge community and culture, religion, family ties, friend ties that are like Pakistani and Indian. And similarly, we have really strong American ties, American roots, American culture and mindset. That's really well defined in this book between like white and black South Africa. I thought that was a really cool theme in this book too.
Yeah, that's very interesting. The other thing that you said I found interesting is the whole idea that we grow up, especially in the United States, pretty sheltered through our teens and 20s. But when you look at history, people used to be very independent very early on in life. There's stories, many stories of kids leaving their house when they're 8, 9 years old, 10 years old, going to become, apprentices to different people, learning from them and growing and learning the art instead of going to school. Or, you know, um, parents weren't making every single decision for them. They were educating themselves, learning from their interactions with other people, and they were
Yeah.
more in the world. Whereas we do not leave and go in the real world until we're maybe 18, and now even later, right? Maybe sometimes even we're 25, 26, because schooling has become so longer. Our parents tend to shelter us more. I'm noticing more and more parents are starting to make more major decisions for kids. And sometimes, we've talked about this in the past. Sometimes you have to kind of find balance of when you let that, cut that cord and let the kid make those decisions for themselves in the real world and grow up, right? Where is that right balance?
Yeah, I mean it's like impossible to strike, but I hear you. It's like the helicoptering by parents has become more and more common. Where it seems like it's become more common if you just read about it and watch social media videos, yeah, just let the kids live.
Yeah, that's an interesting book. This is not one of the books I thought about, but you talking about South Africa, apartheid South Africa, reminded me of another book I read, which was an easy read, was Trevor Noah's Born a Crime, and
Yeah,
where
it's a good one.
yeah, he talks a lot about his upbringing and him, his dad being a white South African man, his
Right,
mom
right.
being a black South African woman. That was an interesting book as well. But
Yeah.
that's not one of the books I thought about. But the book that I kind of talk about is, I was thinking when I was thinking about these books to talk about, I was thinking, okay, there's one about health and medicine, and the other one about wealth, and then maybe psychology and mind. And the books I recently read a lot of books about people's relationship with money and wealth. And there's a series of books that I've read that I found really interesting. Two of them are by this author called Morgan Housel. Uh,
Okay.
it's called Psychology of Money and Art of Spending Money. And the other one, the last one, the book is called Die with Zero. It's by Bill Perkins. And these are very interesting books that define really well, the idea and relationship of people with money. Psychology of money and art of spending money. By Morgan Housel, they talk about how, first of all, like, as people grow up, they really do not understand what it means to be rich versus wealthy, right? We've talked about that.
Yeah.
People can have a high income, but not using it right and not investing properly, not saving right, and just completely blowing away your money can lead you, you know, completely broke and dependent, right? And the key theme to a lot of these books is wealth truly is, the freedom of your time, the ability to say no, right? There was an interesting quote that I read in the book, and it talked about you are truly wealthy when uh, the money that you refuse tastes sweeter than the money that you accept.
Yeah.
It's the ability to say no to different ideas or work that you have to do because you don't need to do something. A lot of these books talk about, your it's not about you buying fancy cars or buying a fancy house, but buying your time with money, and buying your time with money is it's more important than any of these superficial things. Morgan also talks a lot about how a lot of things we do now, like buying a car, buying a house, we're truly not doing it for ourselves. A lot of times we're doing it for others, to show others or compete with others, or thinking that someone is going to be impressed with us. But most of the times, people are not truly impressed by you when they see your car, your house. They don't think, oh my, this person is super accomplished. I want to be like him. They look at a car, they're like, oh, that's an amazing car. You don't even think about the person that's driving it. So they talk
Yeah,
about
it's
that
like that chasing status is just a false game. I mean, it's a game no one wins.
no one wins. You can continue to chase status. The guy that makes $100,000 a year always wants the life of a guy who makes $200,000 a year. And the guy who makes $200,000 a year wants the life of a guy who makes $500,000 a year.
It's never enough.
Billionaire always wants a billionaire's life. So you're never going to be satisfied. You're never going to be happy with what you have if you keep chasing status. And the only way to get out of that cycle is to stop focusing on status and focusing on what truly makes you happy, and using your money to make yourself happy for the things you like doing. Some of the examples he gives is, when you're everyone loves doing vacations. When you go out and you go on a fancy vacation, you go stay in a nice resort and fly first class, and it's a great way to spend money, and no one's telling you not to spend that money. But truly, what's you're really enjoying there is the time that you spend with your loved ones, your friends, your wife, your kids. That's truly the part that you really enjoyed. You could be taking a much cheaper vacation and still love it, because you're spending time with the people that you love rather than all the money that you're spending on, right? So it's not a lot of times about the money, and you should always spend money, buy experiences, and but if you focus on what's at the core of things, is why you truly like spending that money, then you should might as well do it. But not because it's going to look cool on Instagram, or it's going to look, my friends or strangers are going to be impressed with what I'm doing and kind of vacations I'm doing. I think getting out of that mindset is important.
Yeah, that's cool, man. I got to read that series of books. I mean, there's so many books on wealth and mindset and all that stuff, but this one seems pretty interesting just in the way it's framed, to focus on just that experiences and how to look at what you said, the difference between wealth and riches, rather than just being a slave of your time, right? Like if
Yeah.
you really want to make more money, you're basically just giving away your time in exchange for the money. And you can only make real wealth and be free when it's not tied to your time. You're no longer your rate limiting step. I mean, that's a huge thing. That's why it's called financial freedom. You're free of your finances.
Mhm. Yeah, the third one that I mentioned was die with zero, right? And the whole idea of that is, um, at the time he talks about different, every chapter is a different strategy of why you should die with zero. The whole idea is that when you die, you should have no money left, because you really don't need money in your grave, right? Once you're dead, all that money is useless now. So he talks about how you should kind of learn how to save money and learn how to build wealth, but also spend it. Don't just be so focused on hoarding money all your life, and keep hoarding and hoarding and hoarding and building these massive reserves of money into your debt. And
Yeah.
how he gets a lot of criticism from some of the friends. Hey, what about your family? What about your kids? Why don't you do you not want to leave any money for your family or your kids? And his whole idea is, so if you really want to help your family, your kids, your kids, your wife, your brother, your sister, give them money during while you're alive. If you have enough money that's going to last you forever into your death, why not give them money earlier when they need it? Right? Most of the people, they're living into their 80s, 90s. By the time they die, their kids are in their late 60s or mid 60s. Did you? What are they going to do with that money now? Maybe they could have used that money back in their 20s and 30s when they were trying to make that down payment or pay off their loans, or
Yeah, you can
uh,
give someone a really big leg up earlier on in life rather than letting them struggle, kind of figure it out and make it. And then, like you said, when they're 60 years old and their parents pass away at 90, that's when they get a big lump sum. And it's like, well, I mean, it's nice, but you didn't really need it, you know?
you didn't really need it. The money could have saved a lot of different headaches. The money could have been invested early into the market and compounded in growth. So the whole idea is, spend money. Don't just hoard it. Spend money. He talks about how he, for his 45th birthday, he this guy made a lot of money. He actually lives in Houston, and he made a bunch of money in energy trading. And what he did at his 45th birthday, he flew all his closest friends and family down to an island in the Caribbean and paid for their whole vacation, and they all spent a whole week there together for his 45th birthday.
Dude, that's pretty awesome.
That's pretty awesome. So he talks about how, like, he thought about, okay, why am I doing that for my 45th birthday and now my 50th birthday? But he's so glad he did this, because his dad was not alive at his 50th birthday. His mom was very
Oh,
sick, not able to travel anymore. So he's like, I did that for my 45th birthday because I thought about it. I spent a massive amount of money, but I did it, and those are the best memories I have with my mom, my dad, my friends. All of them were together in one place. And when I think of heaven, I think of that time. And there's
oh, for
nothing.
sure. I mean, man, can you imagine? Like, if you think the older you get, the moments, if you don't live like in the same city as your family, the moments you actually have with your family are so fleeting. I mean, it's like a weekend every 3 months or 4 months if you're lucky. And you know how many little blocks of 3, 4 month weekends do you have in your whole lifespan and their lifespan? I mean, I saw this one graph online, which is like, as time goes on, you spend so much time initially, like all the time with your family, like your parents, your siblings, and over time it just plummets. And really, it's like, I mean, you will see them collectively, once you are in your mid 30s and have your own kids onwards, maybe like 25, if you're lucky, 30 total more times, which is crazy to think. You saw him every day, every day. So
Yeah.
I bet that was a phenomenal experience. I mean, maybe one of the best like weeks of that guy's life.
Yeah.
He's surrounded by his wife, kids, parents, and all of his closest friends, like all
Yeah.
together for a week. No outside interference or influence or worry. I mean,
Yeah.
that would be awesome.
Yeah, you're not worried about who's calling you, and you're just
Right.
there spending time. You said that the graph is, the stat is that you spend 80% of the time with your kids until they're 13 years old. After that, it's 20% of the time.
Which is
So,
nuts, dude. It's
yeah,
crazy.
I see
Yeah.
my son and daughter every day, all day long, right? But this is the most time I'll spend with them. And after they turn 13, 14, 15, the time I spend with them is going to go down and down. Maybe they'll see them maybe, if I'm lucky, once a week. If I'm lucky, like once a month. But most people do not see their kids that often, right?
Yeah.
So spending your money wisely, yes, saving, being good about saving money, investing money, growing your wealth, but also spending money, because what are you going to do with money? What, what are you going to do with all the money when you're dead, right? You
Yeah.
have to spend money on experiences, spending time with your family, doing stuff for your kids when they're older and need that money, rather than when you're dead and they don't need that money. Right? So that book was also pretty awesome. I really enjoyed the idea. It was a shift in mindset. And same with the Morgan Housel books. Especially, I enjoyed The Psychology of Money. For me, it wasn't as relevant because I was already doing a lot of those things, and in terms of investing and saving, and all that. But the art of spending money, the art of spending, I think that's what it's called, art of spending. That book kind of made me shift my mindset a little bit, because it showed me that, uh, you know, the difference between your being wealthy and the status chasing idea. That's something we need to get out of.
Yeah, no, that's true. And, that's interesting. We were talking about this a little bit offline too. That a lot of these books that come in the category of self-help or self-improvement, when you read them when you're younger, like early 20s, mid 20s, whatever, I find that they're often much more relevant, much more telling, and you can be like, oh wow, okay. But when you get older and you've lived life and I don't know, you've had relationships, you got married, you have kids of your own, you're in the workplace, you see office dynamics, you have social relationships that come and go. You've lived enough life and you have enough life experiences accumulated of your own. You've had your own successes and failures, and you know yourself, I think, better than you did, 10, 15 years ago. A lot of these self-help, self-improvement books, you kind of read them and you're like, okay, well, I didn't really gain much from this book
Yeah.
because I was already doing X, Y, and Z, or this is already like just a reality of my life. That's not every book, right? Like no one does everything perfectly. No one has got life down. But I find that a lot of these self-help, self-improvement books, it kind of falls into that category, which is why probably what you said, the art of spending resonated with you more than the psychology of money, right? Because perhaps you were already, you know, working for a while. You already have savings accounts. You already have IRAs. You already have outside investment. You know what I mean? Like that just happens as you get older, if you're interested in it. So sometimes those books are less relevant, but others like The Art of Spending, they can change your mindset and give you a new framework to think about.
Yeah, for sure. There's a whole category of self-help books that people recommend so much. There's The Subtle Art, and then there's Seven Habits of Highly Effective People.
Successful people, yeah, yeah.
And a lot of those books, I feel that I would read, and I was like, I'm already doing that, and I realized that yeah, those books would have been great when I was a late teenager, early 20s, and the habits that I built then, luckily have brought me to this stage of my life through different struggles, but those books would have been very effective at that time. But now the books that I really find insightful are very different than those self-help books, right?
Yeah.
There's certain self-help books that really teach me a lot of things, but they're now different types of books. I'm trying to learn more about, in terms of growing my business, not starting a business, but growing a business, um, what to do with the money, how to be smart about it, rather than just blindly, and even more about philosophy and deeper meaning of life as well. So I think those books are much more insightful to me now than they would have been maybe in my 20s. In my 20s, I wouldn't read The Art of Spending Money or Die with Zero. I would have read that, and I was like, I don't have any money to.
Yeah. It's like, well, this is for future Humayun to figure out, right?
So I think there are certain self-help books that are good for certain stages of your life, right?
For sure, for sure. I mean, a book that like maybe contrary to that, I guess it's in this whole genre of self-help, self-improvement is 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. Um, I think that book, honestly, is relevant and can remain relevant in different ways throughout your entire life because, the principles and the historical context and stories that Green brings into this book in each of these 48 different chapters, these 48 different laws, I mean, they're awesome. Like, for example, I mean, each chapter is a different title, each chapter is a new law in this book. Like, one law, for example, is never outshine the master. Another law is be mysterious and basically be unpredictable. Another one is let your actions speak rather than engaging in argument. Like there's all of them, right? But all of them, each chapter is like, 10, 15, 20 pages, and it's nothing but stories from history of famous figures who have succeeded or failed, which is what I find is honestly sometimes more interesting, the failure of the laws and the consequences of what happens when you don't uphold these laws. Because they've held true time and time again in personal relationships, in like male female interaction, like seduction type relationships, not just business interactions and friendships. In terms of courting someone and being a suitor and all that stuff, there's a lot of that in the book. There's a lot of business success, military failures, battles, and then the courtroom. In like Renaissance Europe, that was a big stage, right, where all these aristocrats would gather. So the context and the characters that Green brings in, and tons of research. It's a very dense book with a lot of details. I think is awesome. Anything from if you want to have a venture and you have an idea and you need to get money, how do you do that? How do you convince people? How do you gather wealth together to make something happen? If you want to have a negotiation at work, you want a promotion, you want a higher salary, you want another employee to work with you to offload you, how do you do that? How do you execute that? What is a successful way to go about that? And the book has a lot of themes. It's almost like manipulative has a negative context, right? The tone of that word is usually negative, but it basically, the book allows you, if you use these laws appropriately, to manipulate your surroundings, your relationships, and people to like get what you want. That's really what the book is about. The power is getting what you want, right? And so that's what the book is about. And I think it's wonderful because it's one of those books that you don't necessarily read it cover to cover. You can kind of jump in and out, or if you're going through something, your boss is giving you trouble at work, you have a coworker who just pisses you off all the time and it's a regular thing and makes you annoyed. There's some issue you're having with your kid's coach, whatever it is, you can reference certain parts of the book and see like, oh, okay, that's how this happened, or oh, okay, I shouldn't do this. This is a negative consequence. I find that book to be awesome. My uncle actually gave it to me as a gift when I graduated from high school. And I read it at that time. I've read it probably, in snippets, depending on what was relevant, so many times in my life. I really, really like it a lot. It's very well written.
That's amazing. That book is Abandoned Prisons because
Yeah.
they don't want inmates to read those books and kind of use those strategies for manipulation as well.
And basically, they would create like a successful enterprise within prison itself.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's one of the book that shows up on every single list when you look up like
Oh, yeah.
top business or books in terms of, and a lot of I think Robert Greene's ideas go back to Stoicism too. I think there's this whole idea that the whole philosophy of Stoicism that dates back to like the early Roman times, with Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, or there's a lot of Stoic books. I don't know how to say that. But there's a lot of Stoic books, and a lot of I think Robert Greene has some influence from those books as well. So, but these laws of power, I think, it's one of those books that you can just read a chapter a night, or just randomly pick up a random page and open it up and read about it. There's a lot of interesting ideas in there, for
Oh,
sure.
tons, man. Tons of great ideas. And, just like the people, anyone who's been through a history class through high school, you're going to know facts and figures, right? And dates and battles and people's names. That's like, I don't know, for better or for worse, that's what like school history focuses on. But it's the book, The 40 Laws of Power is like a who's who of like the famous figures throughout history. I mean, anyone and everyone, generals, military leaders and dictators, country leaders, famous philosophers, scientists, artists, sculptors, like all of these people are mentioned in the book, and they're famous for a reason. They were masters at their craft, but they were really also masters at getting what they want and converting relationships to their benefit. I mean, that's how you become a well-known figure in history, and that's what the book is about. It's basically how these people created a successful personality around them, and
And
became who
not
they
with
are.
those who succeeded, with those who failed, right? That's the interesting part. And it's always,
Yeah.
even in business school, like, when you do an MBA or take business classes, there's a lot of learning from not just the businesses or the people that succeeded, but the people who failed, right? There's a lot of things, there's a lot of learning in failure, and there's a lot of different ideas of failure in that book too, that hey, this failed because they did not use this law or use this law incorrectly, or did not follow these certain principles. So those are some great lessons as well.
Oh, for sure they are.
Now, speaking of kind of, book off the beaten path, this is a very interesting book that I read, and this was around. I think I read this book when I was, I believe, in residency, or maybe like 7 or 8 years ago. It's a book by Michael Pollan. He's an author, and he's a Harvard professor that wrote a lot of books about cooking and about nutrition in the beginning. But then he wrote this very interesting book, and it's called How to Change Your Mind. It's all about the science behind psychedelics and where the psychedelic movement is going towards. That book kind of blew me away, because all my life, and different um, news articles and media, you would always think of psychedelics as something very dangerous, harmful, a drug that can cause you to go psychotic and lose it and kill a bunch of people. That's how in history a lot of psychedelics were presented. But there was a whole movement behind psychedelics, and now there's a new movement behind psychedelics as well. And he talks about that. It's very interesting, because it's not just he talks about the science of psychedelics. So he talks about different science, the research behind it, what we know, what we don't know, why the research has not been done, and where the research is being done. But he also does a personal kind of blog and goes through each trip of each psychedelic, and talks about his experience and kind of documents it very vigorously. He talks about his trip with LSD, his trip with psilocybin, and with DMT. Um, there's a lot of different interesting principles in that book. And one of the principles he talks about is, what as we grow older, right? When we're born, is our our minds are like that fresh snow, on a ski slope. When snow just falls and everything's just fresh. And as we grow older, we see people, we build biases, we build ego, right? Over time, and it's kind of like a ski slope, uh, getting these tracks and marks and getting hardened, right? You build certain perspectives on life, right? And what psychedelics kind of do is a fresh set of snow completely on your brain, that kind of refreshes you and opens your mind, and those previous biases, previous thought processes and mental networks you had, uh, of how to think about it just completely changes it and makes you think outside the box, and gives you a new perspective on life and death as well. It makes you more connected with nature, and there's, truly, it was interesting, because a lot of the harms, there can be harm with psychedelics. You have people who are prone to schizophrenia or any other psychotic disorders, can really get harmed from use of psychedelics. Uh, but a safe use, monitored use of psychedelics can be very profound for a lot of people. And there's countless examples in history of many very successful people who've created many amazing things in the world, have used psychedelics. The Beatles, Steve Jobs, a lot of the Silicon Valley tech startup. It's very common to do microdosing of psychedelics in Silicon Valley, right? So psychedelics have a role. There's a lot of research being done. Um, so this was a very interesting book to me, and the way he documents each encounter with LSD, DMT, and psilocybin is interesting.
That's really interesting. I mean, especially, he gives his own personal account. For one, the honesty, involved in doing that, given his reputation and his standing, his credentials and all, the basically being like, yo, I just went and tripped balls, and here's how it felt, right?
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful. I think people that share that information about themselves without worrying about consequences, it adds credibility and it adds trust, I think, to the reader that this guy is legit. Look what he did, and he's telling us about it, and he gives an unfiltered version. But I think that's really respectable.
Yeah.
The other thing too, yeah, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
No, the one thing he talks about is very interesting. There's an experiment during, I think it was in at NYU, I believe, and they did this experiment where there's people who were dying because of cancer, and they were in terminal stages of cancer, and they did this experiment where they treated them with psychedelics, and by going through that trip and that the whole journey of using psychedelics, their fear of death just completely went away, and it was very well documented about how these people who were in terminal stage of life at first, their fears about death, complete dying, going away, were very high on the scale. And once they went through the trip, they talked about how they felt bigger sense of purpose. They felt connected with the world, and they weren't afraid of dying anymore. And that's pretty much, it was very strong in every single one of these individuals. Same thing with people who were struggling with PTSD. PTSD is kind of those hardwired mental networks that our body creates because of prior trauma as well. And use of psychedelics there's some early promising data that might get rid of those hardened. It's kind of like putting fresh snow on your brain, where it gets rid of those mental pathways you created in the past that trigger physical responses, right? So
Yeah, it can be like a proper reset that your brain needed.
yeah, it's a proper reset. So he talk about psychedelics being like a reset on your brain, where you're able to completely look at life in a new way. There was an interesting article that I read. I think it was the New Yorker, and it was called "Your Priest on Psychedelics." And this is your priest on psychedelics, and they took a bunch of religious leaders, a lot of you know, mostly Christian, some Jewish, and even the Muslim religious scholar, and they went through a psychedelic journey. And later, these people reported a stronger connection with God, stronger connection with spirituality, and even stronger belief in their particular faiths. And it's a very interesting idea that psychedelics make you more spiritual, make you appreciate nature more, the world more, and you feel a deeper connection with, a higher being while being on psychedelics and after
Yeah.
psychedelics.
What's interesting is like the broad range of people and their backgrounds that have been documented using psychedelics with success. It's also, you just mentioned these religious leaders, and then same thing with like musicians. I mean, there's so many musicians and artists and stuff that have reported honestly that they've used psychedelics. So the religious leaders gained further in touch with God and their belief system, right? The artists expanded their art and almost accentuated their art and their artistic capabilities. Like just like Silicon Valley guys, they were able to do better at their business, their software, their coding, their ideas, their execution. It almost like, in a way, it like hones and sharpens your ability to apply yourself to whatever it is you're doing, right? Which is very interesting. It's almost like our mindset is that the medications or drugs that would make the mind hyper focused, like a singularity of purposes, like caffeine or ADHD medication, like Ritalin and stuff. But that may not necessarily be true, right? And I'm making like a claim, unsubstantiated, but I'm just thinking aloud. What if there's other areas of the brain that are very strongly involved with achieving what one's goal is, not necessarily like intelligence or focus, because it's not solely those things that make someone successful in their craft, right? Whether it's success in terms of your ability to believe and get in touch with God and your religion, which is what religious leaders are trying to do, make real music that resonates with people, which is what artists are trying to do, and then have a successful startup company that becomes something, which is what the Silicon Valley people are trying to do. Just success and like knowing the path in your craft. Maybe something like this, an outside of mind experience, like a new reset in a way, like the fresh snow on a mountain. That's what these psychedelics can do.
Yeah, and what it does is, and he talks about this in the book a little bit, where it doesn't really make you focus per se, but it allows you to kind of as you grow, you build an ego within you where you start thinking of yourself as very important, and your own ideas and your thoughts are what matter. And what it does, it completely resets that, and what all the ideas and beliefs you had about something, it completely goes away. And then you look at something, a new idea, a new perspective in a different light, in a different way. And that's why most people who do these psychedelics safely, they usually have someone supervising them and leading them in the way, right? You don't want to do some of these psychedelics, and that's how what the experts say, that a lot of the psychedelic trips should be done by someone who's guiding you, and you discuss with them the purpose why you're doing it and what are some of your goals from it, and through with those goals in mind, they guide you in that trip to unlock those ideas that are somewhere deep within your brain, right? As you go through life, you learn information somewhere deep within your mind. That information is hidden, and with the use of these psychedelics, you're able to unlock that and look at it in a different way. But you need someone guiding you through this process.
You need a shaman. You need a shaman.
So it's an interesting idea. That book really opened my mind to it, and I think it's an area that we really need to study and look into, especially with the growing epidemic of mental health in this country.
For sure, man. I mean, that's been like studied. I mean, the literature is growing on it, but like ketamine microdosing is like a real thing, or at least is becoming even more of a thing. But I've been reading some about it, like for treatment refractory depression, like that doesn't respond to your typical SSRIs, SNRIs. I mean, ketamine microdosing, again, monitored and making sure it's the right patient. It has shown benefit. So I mean, I think it's scratching the surface. These are things that haven't been allowed to be researched for a long time, and who knows what's going to come of it?
Yeah, everyone should read that book. Yeah.
That's cool.
What's your
That's
last one?
cool. The last one is another fiction book. It's kind of a historical fiction, crime-related book. It's The Power of the Dog. So the theme for Adil today is all three of the books I've said is power. The Power of One, 40 Laws of Power, and The Power of the Dog. But The Power of the Dog is by Don Winslow. And it's basically a story about this DEA agent who basically works on the Texas-Mexico border and within Mexico itself, working against the cartel, trying to break up their drug rings. And I mean, the book basically is just that. It's about a huge expose, a ton of research that Winslow did to write this book about the cartel itself, the different areas in Mexico they operate, the routes they take, how they smuggle stuff into Texas, California, Florida, the amount of technology that is used by the cartels. I mean, they are advanced. They're one of the most successful business enterprises in the world, whether they're criminal or not. I mean, it's very impressive, and how brutal it is, and how like people are butchered. I mean, there's just no regard for anything other than the end goal, passing the product, making the money, and the chaos and violence that's strewn in its path. And how the main character, along with his cadre of DEA agents and mercenaries, all this stuff, they try their best to take the cartel down, slowly but surely working their way up, and how they are so understaffed and under militarized in comparison to what the cartel has, because like money talks. And the correlation that he brings with real history that's happened between America and Mexico, the whole war on drugs, the U.S. and CIA known involvement in Latin America, regime change. I mean, all of it's very, very accurate. And I think that's what the book has caught on so well. It's a three-part series about this, about how the cartel has just grown and grown and grown, and the roots it's taken within America, because like we are the biggest drug users on the planet. That's just
Yeah.
a fact. We as a country. So the book is just awesome. It's very, very well written. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's like 300 some pages. I think I read the whole thing in a couple days. It's one of those books you can't even put down. So more than like resonating with me in any way, it's not that I gained anything from the book other than honestly just enjoyment. I thought it was an awesome read. It's like there's a movie, not on this book itself, but the movie Sicario
Oh
with
yeah.
Benicio del Toro. It's a very similar type of book as that movie is, right? It tells a similar story. So that's kind of what the book is about. But I loved it. I think it's one of the best books and most engrossing books I've ever read.
Well, I'll have to give that. I haven't. This is the first time I heard of that one, so
Oh
that's
man, it's just such a fun book, especially if you're like, I've always thought the cartel and that whole thing was just so interesting. That it's just like such a criminal thing, but at the same time they're so advanced, and it's just like, I mean, depending on what you Google and what you read, some sources say that the cartel makes more money collectively on planet Earth than like the oil and gas industry. I mean, it's absurd the scale of drug use by human beings, right? So it's just like a thing that's tied to us as humans at this point. It's crazy.
It's amazing. Yeah, there's so many books out there, man. And that's why I struggled with this episode because I had to really
It's
cut
so
down.
hard to pick.
So hard to pick. It's so hard to pick. And
Yeah.
if you had asked me tomorrow or day after tomorrow, I might have picked different books. But today, these were the books that I thought about, and
Right.
so I think we should do this two docs book club maybe every 6 months or every quarter.
Yeah, every so often. I'm down.
And I think it's a good idea to kind of talk about different ideas in books because these books really bring out different ideas that we can kind of use in our everyday life as physicians, as fathers, as bros. So
Yeah.
so I
Bros
think
and their books, baby.
let's wait till the next two docs book club. Maybe in a few months from now we'll talk about maybe five to six other different books.
Yeah, there you go. If anyone who's watching has any suggestions, throw them out there in the comments. We'd love to see some new book recommendations. But we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in to Two Docs One Mic.